Good day, viewers. How are you today? You're welcome to our e-learning program. We have a topic for us today known as international trade. I hope you are aware that this is economics class. Now we'll be talking about international trade in today's topic. And now, what is international trade? Simply defined as the exchange of goods and services between one country and another country. Now, there's a difference between internal and international trade. When you say internal trade, otherwise known as domestic trade, it's a trade within a country. But when you talk about international trade is otherwise known as external trade. Is a trade between two or more countries. Now, we have types of international trade. We have the multinational trade and we have the bilateral trade. Now, what is multilateral trade? Multilateral trade is when you trade with several other countries. You call that multilateral. But when you say bilateral trade, it's a trade between two countries. Is that clear? Now, there are some terms that you need to know in international trade. Basic terms that you need to know in international trade. So let me just give you those things so that you don't get lost while we are discussing. Now, there's what we call quotas. Now, what is quota? Quota is the maximum amount of commodity that is allowed to be imported or exported at a particular period. You refer to that as a quota. Then what is dumping? Dumping is the act of selling a commodity in a foreign country less than the price obtained in your country. For example, you sold your commodity in Nigeria for 100 naira. You went to America to sell it for 70 naira. That act, you have reduced the amount that you are supposed to sell it because you want to attract more people to buy that. That is suicidal in international trade, but it's being done. And today's, in Nigeria, where I come from, you observe that dumping has actually affected our country's economy. For example, the textile industry that was waxing very strong in the years past, has suddenly those gone by drain. Why? Because the government of the day refused to tackle those people that were bringing cheap materials into the country, and as a result of that, affected the textile industry of Nigeria. But that's politics, that's by the way. But I just like to explain to you the effects of dumping in an economy. Now, another thing that you need to know about the terms that are used in international trade is what we call tariff. Now, what is tariff? Tariff is the art of the tax that is placed on goods imported into a country. That tax that is placed on goods imported into a country is called a tariff. Okay, so you pay tariff, and in order to encourage or discourage people, you impose a tax. Another thing you need to know is what they call embargo. What's an embargo? It's an outright ban on commodity that is coming to a country. So that outright ban of commodity that is coming to a country is known as embargo. Okay, you refer to that as embargo. Now, what is the next one? Excise duties. What are excise duties? They are duties that are paid on goods locally made in the country. So they are called what? Excise duties. You've called that excise duties. Now, as we continue, if there are other terms that I need you to know, I will let you know. Okay, infant industries. What are infant industries? Of course, there are baby industry that are not yet matured enough to compete favorable with other countries. So once you are not matured to compete favorable with other countries, you refer to that kind of industry as an infant industry. Okay? Now go straight to advantages of international trade. Of course, one of the advantages of international trade is that it allows the exchange of goods and services to take place between one country and another country. Another advantage of international trade is that it facilitates exchange. Okay, you realize that the exchange rate is there. The other advantage of international trade is that we gain ideas, technology. You produce a commodity in your country, we can also gain from you, and you can also get our own. That's just that there's an exchange of ideas, there's an exchange of resources between one country and another country. There are some places that we don't even know how to do anything, but we enjoy what other countries have done. Why? Because of that. Now, another advantage of international trade is that it has provided employment opportunity. The custom duties that is placed by the custom officials, they are now working. So they need to place custom duties done by the custom officials, and those custom officials are gainfully employed. So they are providing employment opportunity. Government has enabled them to get employment opportunity. Advantage of international trade is also provide revenue for the government. So even as they are providing employment opportunity for the custom officers that are there, government is also generating revenue from those people who are enforcing the law that have been announced. So those are the advantages. Now we also have disadvantage, because everything that has an advantage also have a disadvantage. One, it encourages importation of harmful products. So many products have been smuggled into a country that has led to the death of innocent people and even guilty people. It has also led to dumping. I explained what dumping was all about before, and that was why I had to explain the terms so that you will not have a problem with understanding the topic. So dumping is when a commodity is sold in a foreign country less than the price obtained in the home country. So it has, and that was why I was explaining what happened to Nigeria, that the government did not, till now the government is still fighting, and a lot of people have been laid off from their job because of the sensitive attitude of the government that allow people to come to the country and with time just wave off our textile material company. But let's hope that it will revive itself after some time. Okay. Now, another disadvantage of international trade is that the tariff that is placed on commodities actually discourage people from buying. There are some very legitimate commodities, but when you look at the amount that is being paid on those commodities, it has actually discouraged people from getting involved in international trade. Okay. Now the next thing you need to look at again, and that is an disadvantage of international trade, is that one way or the other it has led to, excuse me, it has led to what on this uniformity of goods. One way or the other, just observe that the balance of payment deficit. It has led to balance of payment deficit. And what is balance of payment deficit? When the exportation is greater than the importation. When you have prepaid, the receipts is less than the payments. I mean, the payment is greater than the receipt. It has led to down balance of payment deficit, and that has caused a lot of problems associated with international trade. Now let's also go to another subtopic in this topic, and that is problems of international trade. We have some problems associated with international trade. We have problems like the language barrier. We have problems like the cultural barrier. We have problems like the political barrier. We have problems like we have language, currency barrier. Now let's start with the language barrier. When countries that are involved in international trade do not understand each other, it constitutes a problem, and that is one of the problems that we are looking at, the language barrier. When different countries are speaking different language, the ability for one to understand each other is a big problem. It's a language barrier. Then we have cultural barrier. Culture is the way of life of people. What you like in your country might not be what I like. Like there's a country I know that the men wear skirts, Scotland. Now if you now bring skirts to my own country for me to wear, I'll look at you like an abominable set of a person, because for those who are like, how can I be wearing skirt and shoe? But in Scotland they put on shoes and they wear skirt, and very expensive as a matter of fact. So that's the culture. Their culture varies, and even though they enjoy doing it, in our own society we see that it's a taboo for a man to wear shoes, stockings and skirts. Does it make sense? It does not make a single sense. But that's our culture. The next one is political instability. A country that you realize that so many countries have political instability, and as a result of that, one government of a country can just come and decide to bring a policy that is not accepted by another government, and before you know, and it becomes a problem. So that political instability is an issue to be tackled. Then we have currency. Currency barrier. Wow, that's another issue. That's another issue. Different countries have different currencies, and this is a problem that should be worked upon. Alright. Now, without wasting our time, let's look at balance of payments. Now, what is balance of payments? Balance of payment is the comparison of a country's receipts from its visible and invisible exports and its payment on a visible and invisible imports. So I can invariably say that balance of payment is just the difference between the comparison of a country's receipts from her payments. Now, if the receipt is greater than her payment, you refer to that as a favorable balance of payments. But if the payment is greater than the receipt, it is referred to as unfavorable balance of payment. Do you understand that? Now, once you are given a question, for example, and you have the visible exports, the visible exports plus invisible exports, I have minus visible imports plus invisible imports. Whatever you get is your balance of payments. This one comprises of what we call receipts minus your payments. And whatever you get, it will give you a balance of payment, either a deficit balance of payment or a favorable balance of what? Payment. So your balance of payment can simply be defined as the comparison of a country's total receipts and her payment. And I also told you that the comparison can be either a favorable balance of payment or a deficit balance of payment. Is that clear? Now, having said that, let's go to the next line of action. Now, okay, before we go to the next line of action, the balance of payment is made up of 3 components. Okay, we have the monetary movement account, we have the current account, and we have the capital account. So made up of the monetary movement account, the current account, and what? The capital account. Now the monetary movement account shows how the balances of the current and the capital account are settled. Okay, how the current and the balances of the current and the capital account are settled. And the current account, we also talked about the addition of the visible and invisible trade, while the capital account talks about the inflow of capital, in and outflow of capital at a particular period. Now we'll go to the balance of trade. We have defined balance of payments. Let's look at balance of trade. Now there's something I did not tell you, which is the visible item. What are visible items? Visible items are items that you can see, that you can feel. While invisible items are services that are rendered. So that's why we're talking about visible items. They are talking about things that you can feel or see, while invisible items are things that are rendered, that you cannot see, shipping, tourism, and so on and so forth. They are referred to as the invisible item. Okay, now the next line is for balance of trade. Now more often than not, they ask you questions like, what is the difference between the balance of trade, the balance of payment, and the terms of trade? What's the balance of trade? Balance of trade is simply defined as the comparison of a country's exports and imports. I'm using word "are" because more often than not, countries are usually referred to as using "are." Okay, so the comparison of a country's exports and the country's imports is known or referred to as the balance of trade. Is that clear? Now, when you talk about the balance of trade, don't mix it up. Balance of trade comprises of export and import, but the balance of trade comprises of the exports, which comprises the visible and invisible exports. But the balance of trade is only comprised of the words visible export minus visible import, or invisible balance of trade, invisible export minus invisible import. So simply, I put it as balance of trade is just the difference between the exports minus imports. Is that clear? So export minus import is the balance of trade. But if I want to get the invisible balance of trade, I'll just simply say invisible export minus the invisible imports. Alright, now having said that, we'll go to the next line of action, which is terms of trade. Terms of trade. Terms of trade is just the rate at which a country's export exchange for our imports. That rate at which a country's export exchange for our import is called the term of trade. And what's the formula? We have the price index of exports over the price index of imports times 100 over 1. Price index of export over price index of import times 100 over 1 is known or referred to as the balance, the term of trade. So let me just simply show you the magic behind all these things. If you must be able to define the three of them without problem. Balance of trade is the comparison of a country's total receipts and total payments. Balance of payment or rather balance of trade is not the comparison of a country's export and import. And the balance of trade can either be a favorable balance of trade or a deficit balance of trade. While term of trade is just the rate at which a country's export exchange for our import. Very simple. I want to believe that you can do justice to that whenever you sit in any kind of examination that you are exposed to. Now the last one I want to talk about is exchange rates. And what is exchange rates? Exchange rate is the rate at which a country's currency exchanges with another country's currency. That rate in which your country's dollar exchanges with Nigeria's currency is called the exchange rate. So that rate at which a country's currency exchanges with another country's currency is known or defined as the what? As the exchange rates. Is that clear? Alright, very good. Now, still on international trade, there's what we call comparative cost advantage. Now, there's a guy named David Ricardo. David Ricardo was the person who actually formulated that theory of comparative cost advantage. And what did he say about comparative cost advantage? For the word compare, he came up with comparative. He said it is better for a country to produce a commodity in which it has a comparative cost advantage over the other commodity. That is, a country should produce a commodity in which you gain than the other one. Nigeria produces crude oil, I also produce crude, I also produce cocoa. According to David Ricardo, he said it is better for Nigeria to produce the one in which it will benefit, even though it can produce the two commodities. And the definition just simply says that comparative cost advantage, according to David Ricardo, is when a country should specialize in the production of a country in which it has a comparative advantage over the other commodity. That is, a country should produce a commodity in which the real cost or the opportunity cost is lower compared to the other commodity in which it is producing. Do you understand that? So that was what David Ricardo defined as the comparative cost advantage, which was actually formulated by David Ricardo. The robot Ricardo, R-I-C-A-R-D-O. That was David Ricardo's definition, formulation for comparative cost advantage. Alright. Is there anything I need to tell you more again? So I want to believe that you can always do justice in this topic at any point in time. We look at the terms, we look at the advantage of international trade, disadvantage of international trade. We also look at balance of payment, balance of trade, terms of trade, and we also looked at exchange rate. We also went into problems of international trade. Okay, we looked at the problems of international trade. So at this junction, I want to also appreciate you all for allowing me to come to your homes or to your classes or to your school and receiving this lecture. In the next class, I hope you'll be better. See you and have a nice day. Thank you.